The Wagner Group is a Russian paramilitary organization headquartered in St. Petersburg. It is often described as a private military company, a mercenary network, and Vladimir Putin's private army. Its origins trace back to the 2014 conflict in Ukraine, known as the Donbas War. At the time, Russia required unidentified entities, forces other than its regular military, to support pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine, while avoiding international condemnation. The Wagner Group was established to meet this demand. The central figures behind it were Yevgeny Prigozhin, famously known as Putin's chef, and Dmitry Utkin, a former lieutenant colonel in the Russian Main Intelligence Directorate. A clear division of labor drove the organization. Utkin, who admired the Nazi-era German composer Richard Wagner and used Wagner as his own call sign, handled military command. Meanwhile, Prigozhin managed financing, logistics, and political coordination. Between 2014 and 2015, Wagner was deeply involved in the annexation of Crimea and combat in the Donbas region, acting as a shadow army in situations where the Russian regular military could not intervene directly. Initially, their existence was strictly classified, and the Russian government consistently denied any official connection. This plausible deniability was Wagner's greatest weapon, serving as a convenient tool for the Russian government to pursue national interests while evading responsibility under international law. Subsequently, Wagner's scope of operations rapidly expanded beyond Ukraine into the Middle East and Africa. When Russia launched its military intervention in the Syrian civil war in 2015, Wagner mercenaries were deployed to the front lines as the vanguard for the Assad regime's forces. In exchange for battlefield successes, such as the recapture of Palmyra, they secured rights to oil and gas fields within Syria. This marked their transformation from a mere military organization into a business conglomerate profiting from natural resources. This business model was later deployed across Africa. In countries such as Sudan, the Central African Republic, Mali, and Libya, Wagner amassed vast wealth by providing security and training for dictators and military regimes in exchange for mining rights to gold and diamond mines. With the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Wagner's history entered a new and arguably its bloodiest phase. Although initially deployed as an elite force of professional mercenaries, the deepening quagmire of the war led Prigozhin to adopt an unprecedented tactic, recruiting inmates from Russian prisons in exchange for presidential pardons. This army, which swelled to tens of thousands, was thrown into the brutal battle for Bakhmut in Donetsk Oblast, a conflict so intense it became known as the meat grinder. While achieving certain military successes, it came at the cost of immense casualties. During this period, Prigozhin emerged from the shadows and began using social media to cultivate a public persona. He styled himself as a true patriot and a vocal critic of the incompetent Ministry of Defense leadership, whom he accused of ignoring the realities of the front lines. This significantly bolstered his political influence within Russia. However, his rapid rise led to a terminal confrontation with the Russian military establishment. When Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and other military leaders moved to bring Wagner under regular army control, Prigozhin retaliated. On June 23, 2023, Prigozhin launched an armed rebellion he termed the March for Justice. Wagner forces bloodlessly seized the military headquarters in Rostov-on-Don and began an advance toward Moscow, precipitating the greatest crisis of the Putin era. While the mutiny ended within a day through the mediation of Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, the defiance of Prigozhin, once a loyal subordinate, exposed deep fractures in the Russian power structure. Exactly 2 months later, on August 23, 2023, a private jet carrying Prigozhin and Utkin crashed over Russia, resulting in the deaths of all top leadership on board. Following the loss of its charismatic leaders, Wagner began a path of rapid dissolution and restructuring. To gain direct control over its overseas assets and military capabilities, the Russian government has integrated Wagner elements into organizations like the Africa Corps under the Ministry of Defense. While the name and organizational form of Wagner are changing, the methods of hybrid warfare via PMCs that they pioneered remain deeply embedded in Russia's foreign strategy. According to British military intelligence, the Russian government has exerted direct control over Wagner since the rebellion. many members have been absorbed into a division of the Russian National Guard commanded by Prigozhin's son, Pavel, while 170 members joined the Chechen Special Forces unit, Amat. Others transferred to another PMC called Redoute, expanding its strength to 7,000 personnel. Furthermore, many joined the Africa Corps to continue operations on the continent. Reportedly, half of the initial 100-man contingent deployed to Burkina Faso were former Wagner operatives. The war crimes and human rights abuses perpetrated by the Wagner Group across the globe, coupled with the organization's inherent opacity, are condemned by the international community as one of the most severe humanitarian crises of the modern era. Operating as a shadow army designed to shield the Russian government from direct accountability, the group created a breeding ground for horrific atrocities in lawless regions beyond the reach of the rule of law. In the Ukraine conflict, particularly since the 2022 full-scale invasion, numerous reports have documented the execution of surrendered Ukrainian soldiers, the torture of civilians, and indiscriminate killings. One of the most shocking aspects was the internal executions within Wagner itself. The group did not hesitate to use extremely brutal methods, such as releasing videos showing the summary execution of their own combatants, accused of deserting or surrendering to the enemy by crushing their heads with sledgehammers. These acts served as a gruesome warning to others. They not only grossly violated international laws regarding the treatment of prisoners of war, but also horrified the world as barbaric acts that undermine the very foundations of modern military ethics. Wagner's footprint in Africa is equally bloodstained. In Mora, Mali, a United Nations investigation revealed that during an operation conducted with the Malian army in March 2022, over 500 civilians were massacred in just a few days under the guise of clearing out terrorists. According to eyewitness accounts, Wagner mercenaries detained residents indiscriminately, executed them without interrogation, and dumped their bodies into trenches. Similarly, in the Central African Republic and Sudan, the group has repeatedly raided and burned villages, committed systematic sexual violence against women, and engaged in torture and enforced disappearances to secure control over gold mines and other resource concessions. A defining characteristic of their crimes is the tactical use of terror. By intentionally targeting civilians, they instill fear to solidify regional control. In Libya, retreating Wagner forces were confirmed to have committed particularly despicable acts, such as rigging residential homes with sophisticated booby traps on sofas, toilets, and behind doors, resulting in the death and maiming of returning civilians. These actions are not merely a breakdown of military discipline, but the inevitable result of Wagner's inherent nature, which prioritizes organizational efficiency and views human life as a mere tool for resource acquisition and political gain. Currently, the International Criminal Court and various human rights organizations continue to pursue these cases as war crimes and crimes against humanity. However, as the organization undergoes restructuring, establishing clear lines of responsibility remains a significant and ongoing challenge. The organizational structure of the Wagner Group stood in stark contrast to the clear charts of typical corporations or the official hierarchies of modern regular militaries. Instead, it adopted an extremely opaque and multi-layered network model. At its core, it was not a single entity, but a massive conglomerate of multiple legal bodies with diverse functions: military, business, information operations, and logistics, all loosely bound together by the personal connections and financial power of its founder, Yevgeny Prigozhin. At the apex of this structure sat Prigozhin as the de facto owner. Although a businessman with no formal military background, he functioned as the executive frontman, personally handling contract negotiations with the Russian Ministry of Defense, weapons procurement, and political coordination with the Putin administration. Meanwhile, the actual command and control of military operations were managed by veteran officers from the Russian Special Forces and the main intelligence directorate, such as Dmitry Utkin and Andrei Troshev. They established a shadow headquarters known as the Back Office, serving as the functional military executive branch responsible for recruitment, payroll, discipline, and strategic planning. A defining characteristic of the frontline units was their dual-tier structure. The elite veteran layer, consisting of seasoned professionals, and the inmate recruits, whose numbers surged following the invasion of Ukraine. The veterans were professionals with extensive combat experience in Syria and Africa. possessing high tactical flexibility and offensive capabilities. In contrast, the units composed of prisoners functioned as assault troops deployed into the brutal wars of attrition known as meat grinders. Controlled through strict penalties and fear, these units fostered a pragmatic culture where performance-based rewards and internal pecking orders took precedence over a formal military rank system. Furthermore, the business network underlying this structure was indispensable. Parallel to the military branch, a multitude of shell companies and affiliates under Prigozhin's umbrella, most notably Concord, engaged in gold mining, oil field security, and sophisticated social media propaganda across Africa and beyond. These companies acted as both the group's revenue stream and its logistics arm, facilitating the smuggling and transport of materials necessary for military operations. Together, they formed a unique ecosystem where military force and economic interests were inextricably linked.